right. What's up, true crime world? You're here with Luminol on the Wall. I'm Bevy.
And I'm Becky.
So today's case is kind of about a serial killer.
Potential.
Depends. We'll get into it, but it's about a potential serial killer, which is wild.
I love how you don't even ask how I am or anything, Bev.
Well, that's because we talked earlier, so I feel like I already know. You're good. You went to TLC. You loved it.
Yeah.
You're happy. You're going to the grandstand tonight. I'm an attentive listener, Becky, so I know it all.
Yeah. There you go.
Anything else you want to add, though?
No.
Aww.
I cut my fingernails a little too short, so my fingers are a little sore.
Ooh, that actually freaking sucks.
I know. It happens every once in a while, you know?
I get the struggles with cutting your nails. I've been trying to cut Coulson's to limited success, like maybe one or two at a time. And then by the time I go to the other ones, he has freaking claws. And he's scratching the shit out of me, Becky, and it hurts. But I can't get his nails cut because I'm slightly scarred from cutting his fingers wide open the last 2 times.
You did that 2 times?
Yes, unfortunately. Wow. And the second one was way worse. Like, I'm pretty sure I just cut the tip of his finger clean off, basically. I didn't even get the nail. I thought I had the nail. I guess I had his finger. It was terrible.
Take them away from you.
I know.
Oh
and now he like moves so much that I'm like even more nervous. I get why people bite the nails of their kids now, like with their own teeth. I get it.
Yeah, because clearly the precision is pretty tough with the nail clippers.
It is. And they're like sharp nail cutters because they have to be, but at the same time. Anyway, so I get it, is all I'm trying to say.
All right, well, since you were so eager to get in the case, let's just do it, Bev.
Okay, let's do it.
So the woman at the center of our case, her name is Sheila LaBarre, and her story began in the rural South. But the horrors that she unleashed played out in the quiet farmlands of New Hampshire. She was born in Alabama in 1958, and Sheila endured a pretty nightmarish childhood of abuse and neglect. Psychiatrists at her trial recalled a house populated with people who could use her however they wanted and wouldn't protect her, even describing a real threat of death in her early world. Her older sister would later confirm that Sheila and her mother were sexually and emotionally abused by their father and his friends. And as you can imagine, this trauma really scarred Sheila, and it really shaped her delusions and fears that would haunt her into her adulthood. In her teens and 20s, Sheila dreamed of stardom. She competed in beauty pageants, but her life remained fairly turbulent. She had multiple short-lived marriages, a suicide attempt that left her comatose, and she also had reoccurring mental health crises. By the early 1980s, she had been hospitalized for psychiatric care after an overdose and a car crash. Doctors noted her mood swings and psychotic breaks were severe, though her condition was complex. As one biographer put it, Sheila's mood disorders could make her psychotic at times. But there wasn't enough evidence to show that mental illness caused her future crimes.
And that's not to say that it didn't, right? Like that her mental illness did cause her future crimes. There just simply wasn't enough evidence to blatantly say that as a fact.
Yes, exactly.
And it's a complicated issue in this case, right? So we'll get into that, but it is definitely something that I want everyone to keep in the back of their minds as we go through this. Like, did her mental illness cause her future crimes? Just keep it in your mind as we go through this case, because I think it's a pretty significant issue in this case. At least I think so.
Yeah, it actually ends up being quite controversial.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in 1987, seeking a fresh start from Alabama, Sheila answered a Lonely Hearts ad in the newspaper. The ad was placed by 61-year-old Dr. Wilfred, aka Bill LaBarre, a wealthy widowed chiropractor living on a 115-acre horse farm in Epping, New Hampshire. Sheila sent him topless photographs in reply, a bold move that immediately set her apart. She was a striking woman with long red hair and an outgoing personality, and Bill was smitten right from the start.
He liked them titties, Becky. That's just how to get men's attention, apparently.
Tits.
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 Boobies.
Show us your tits. No, don't.
But yeah, he's smitten.
Yeah, he's
at
smitten.
her titties.
And her beautiful long hair.
Yeah.
Now, within weeks, Sheila relocated to New Hampshire and moved into his home. Locals remember her as flamboyant and unapologetically sexual.
No doubt.
Yes. No, you know what I have to say? Women who have this like sexual energy, I always really admire, because I feel a lot of people are not like shamed of their sexuality, but like kind of scared to have it out there in the open.
Oh, I think a lot of people are, for sure. Like, I don't think that would be
just reserved.
An overstatement at all. Yeah. I know. I do admire that as well, because I think our sexuality is so important, truthfully.
Oh, yeah.
And I think not to be like fearful of it is a good thing to an extent.
I agree. Now, on top of being kind of like flamboyant and unapologetically sexual, she also drove flashy cars. She wore provocative outfits. And she even earned the nickname Sheila the Peeler, because she would flash her cleavage at passersby, whatever the word is.
Passersby.
Passersby. Thank you, Bevy. Can you imagine that nickname? Sheila the Peeler.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it is good. Or are you a banana? Do you peel? Sorry. I don't know why I thought that.
You know what's odd? You thought banana and I thought potato.
Both you peel, though.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. So it's just kind of funny.
We both go to like fruits and veggies. Love it.
Yeah.
Now, legend has it, she once answered the front door completely naked for a delivery person. And because of this, the small town police quickly learned that any call involving Sheila required 2 officers, just in case her seduction antics led to accusations. As one officer would explain, they needed a backup simply to prove the officer wasn't being led into misconduct.
Wow, hey?
I mean, with the beautiful woman, with good skills and peeler ways, you could really like coerce a cop in, do whatever you want. So they just knew 2 people had to be there.
That's actually kind of funny.
Right.
That they had to like prepare themselves and get backup just for a sexual woman. Right?
I couldn't even imagine.
Kind of funny.
I bet even the women police officers was like, I also need backup. I can't. Just in case. You never know.
She has superpowers.
Her seductive ways draw me in. Now, despite Sheila's desperate arrival under peculiar circumstances, Sheila seemed to fit in on the farm. She never legally married Bill, but took his last name and lived with him for 13 years. Then, in the year 2000, Bill LaBarre died suddenly of heart problems. In his will, the widower left almost everything to Sheila, declaring her his common-law wife. But his adult children were shocked to learn that instead of them splitting the estate, Sheila inherited the house, horses, farmland, cars, and all his savings. Bill's heirs later sued without success, so they got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if it was all in his will. You know, that's the law right there. Like, that's
for sure.
Ultimately what he wanted.
Mm-hmm. But, Beth, I have to ask, to you, does that seem a little weird? To not leave anything for your children?
Yeah, it definitely feels a little bit weird to me.
Yeah. I mean, I also don't know the relationship Bill had with his children, but
it does seem odd.
Yeah, it does.
But given this case, I mean, there's a lot of room for speculation on this matter, I would say.
Oh, for sure. She was known for her seductive ways.
Yeah, maybe he was just so enamored with her that he was like, fuck my kids. Yeah. Or maybe she manipulated him to leave everything to her.
I'll show you my second tit if you leave everything for me.
I feel like that's like a first base thing. Like she might have had to go a little further.
For sure, sex. At least.
Gotta do the home run.
Yeah.
Maybe like head on a daily basis,
Jesus, Bev.
For 2 years. I was like...
to be wealthy, is it worth it?
I'm just
Regardless of
saying, they were
how
together for 13 years, so, like, they probably already did the deed. So she's got to do a little something, something extra for, like, all his inheritance. Come on now.
right.
Yeah.
I just can't believe you said that. Clearly, I am not as open of my sexuality as Sheila was. Anyways, overnight, Sheila became a wealthy widow, and she was only 42. Now, she managed the sprawling farm herself, and she worked really hard to keep the property running. But despite the fortune, friends say Sheila was lonely. Without Bill to care for, she began frequenting phone dating lines and personal ads, and she sought male companionship. You know, she really wanted to fill the void. Now, by 2005, Sheila's 115-acre farm had become a magnet for lonely men. She advertised widely on personal ads, online chat rooms, even homeless shelters. The pattern was always the same. A man would answer Sheila's call, she'd charm him with attention and affection, then invite him to live and work on her farm, promising stability and purpose. But behind the generosity lurks something a lot more sinister. One such man was Mike DeLodge. In early 2005, the 28-year-old answered Sheila's personal ad. Michael was described as a quiet man who enjoyed rural life. He moved to the farm and became one of Sheila's first boarders after Bill's death. Another was Kenny County, a 24-year-old with developmental disabilities and a heart of gold. Now, Kenny lived alone in Massachusetts and wanted to be independent. And in early 2006, he began talking to a woman named Sheila on the telephone dating line. Sheila turned on the charm and sweet talk. They met on Valentine's Day, and Sheila's promises seemed genuine. Within days, Kenny agreed to move to New Hampshire to live on Sheila's farm. His mother, Carolyn Lodge, was cautiously optimistic, and Sheila painted herself as a kind benefactor. A fairy tale situation. Sheila painted herself as a kind benefactor. A fairy tale situation, Carolyn later said, where a good son could earn his keep on a real horse farm. But Sheila had rehearsed this act many times. She sought out men whom society had rejected, observing, as one true crime author noted, that she could control them. These were often lonely, needy men like Kenny who trusted her easily. In private, however, Sheila's behavior turned dark. Old acquaintances, testimonials from town later described an undercurrent of violence. Sheila would brag about owning guns, once even bragging to someone that she kept men locked in cages on the farm. A neighbor's young son was threatened by her once. Another man, a former boyfriend named James Brackett, eventually testified that he lived with Sheila for 6 years and endured repeated beatings. And in one chilling incident, Sheila chased a boyfriend through a field with a revolver, firing shots at him. In another, she took a hatchet to his trailer door and swung at him as he slept. No one in Epping doubted that Sheila was volatile, or that something very wrong was happening on that farm. That sounds wild, Bev.
I know. It's hard to even, like, reply to it because I'm just, like, processing it all.
Yeah, you're like, how can someone be that way?
Like, she took a hatchet to someone while they were sleeping?
Chase someone with a revolver? You know who she reminds me of?
Who?
Catherine Knight.
I know. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, that is...
Just a crazy bitch.
And, like, no one, like, arrests her or does really much about it. They just kind of let her be all scary out in public.
I mean, all of these guys, like, didn't come forward with this information until later on. It just seems really odd. But I honestly do feel like if a man is getting, like, abused in that way, I don't necessarily think they come forward with it in the same way. Like, I don't know if it's, like, as common for men to be abused by women. I really don't think so. And I think there might be, like, some type of weird, like, stigma surrounding it. Yeah, that prevents them from coming forward.
For sure. I can imagine there's, like, a lot of shame behind that.
Yeah. Because it's like, this woman is beating me, right? Like, it kind of seems, I don't know, like, you'd be able to defend yourself. But, like, at the end of the day, how can you defend yourself from a revolver
or hatchet?
And a hatchet? And it's crazy. Let's like go back to the part about how she says she locks men in cages. Like, what?
Like, did she actually, I wonder? Or was that just like some weird brag?
Yeah, like some bravado thing she said.
Oh, yeah,
I
I lock
literally
men in cages. I'm Sheila. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird as shit.
It's weird as hell, but I honestly wouldn't doubt it.
No.
Oh, and another thing to kind of think about, like if she is really targeting vulnerable men, maybe that's also part of why like they didn't come forward.
For sure. It's like when you hear of an abused partner, it's often like, not all the time, but often like people who have like insecurities and are kind of like, they come from certain types of homes or backgrounds, right? There's a lot of factors that would stop someone from saying something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's also the problem with believability too, right? Like would anyone believe these men if they came forward and said like this lady was abusing them?
One could hope they would be believed, but you never know.
Either way, she's batshit crazy.
Either way, yes. Now, by February 2006, Sheila had manipulated Kenny County into her web. They shared dinners, rides around the property, and endless phone calls to Kenny's family to reassure them he was doing well. But as the weeks passed, Kenny began to wither, both physically and mentally. In March 2006, the first real alarm went off. 2 Epping police officers happened upon Sheila and Kenny in a local Walmart. Kenny was in a wheelchair. His face was so swollen with bruises and scars that he was hardly recognizable. And when an officer politely asked Kenny if he was okay, Sheila refused to let Kenny answer. She pushed him abruptly out of the aisles and hurried him toward the checkout. The police were kind of left stunned. Sheila would only say that Kenny was just tired, that he'd been taking warm baths to ease his sore muscles. They really couldn't get her to step aside to let the officers check on him. And they drove away uneasy but without direct proof of wrongdoing, which that is just so messed up.
Yeah.
Like anyone in that position, whether they're disabled or not, why would the police just let them go on their way?
Yeah, I mean, if you see someone's face so swollen with bruises and then have the person that's supposed to be caring for them refuse to let them answer any questions, I don't know. I think that's a serious red flag, and maybe not direct proof or like evidence of wrongdoing, but there should be enough like red flags for the suspicion to be there, which obviously it was. So you would think that they would make an effort to check on them or like stop at her house to make sure that Kenny is okay.
Or at least like separate them.
Yeah.
And, if they got him away from Sheila and he said, yes, I'm fine. My muscles are sore and I have been taking baths, but I'm fine. It's like, okay, I kind of have to take your word. You're an adult, and let them be on their way. But they kind of just were like, oh, like Sheila's kind of making a bit of a fuss. I guess we'll let them go.
Yeah, she was just too fast pushing that wheelchair down the Walmart aisles. She's got some get up and go on her. Us 2 police officers, we just couldn't catch her.
Oh,
we just couldn't do it. But you know what's interesting is the fact that Sheila refused to let Kenny answer does remind me of a lot of cases with human trafficking, like when they bring them out in public or something, or like a hospital for their injuries, and they speak for them and they don't let them answer. I think that's a pretty good indicator of abuse happening.
Yeah.
Because they need to control that person's voice, right? Because they don't know what that person could say.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
So it's sad. It really is. It's like all the signs are there.
And they just let her get away. Well, back in Massachusetts, Kenny's mother, Carolyn, grew increasingly fearful, as she should. And once the Walmart news reached her, she demanded to know if Kenny was in danger. Carolyn was quoted saying, "I was beside myself. I said, and you let her take him? Just like how we're shocked. You just let her take him away?" She later said she's going to kill him. So Carolyn knew this was a bad sitch, and her biggest fear was that she was going to kill him. Carolyn pleaded with local police to remove her son from Sheila's farm. But at that point, the officers still saw Sheila as a bit of an eccentric troublemaker, not a murderer. They assumed Kenny was an adult living by choice with a dominant older woman. They returned to Epping, but with nothing concrete to arrest Sheila on. They just advised her to stop dating so much, as one sergeant later remembered. To Sheila's neighbor, the Walmart scene was disturbing. They gossiped that she was strangling Kenny with a leather strap to keep him in line. But inside the farm's fences, Sheila's control over Kenny only tightened. One morning, at the end of March, a welfare check was scheduled. Kenny hadn't been seen or heard from in days, and his mother insisted the police do something. Sergeant Sean Gallagher and Detective Richard Cote drove their cruiser up the long dirt road to Sheila's 115-acre spread. A barbed wire fence and a hand-painted sign warned, "No trespassing, you are being videotaped." They climbed through a gate and walked up to the farmhouse, and the thick summer air was eerily still. They knocked on the door, and Sheila peered through the curtains, feigning ignorance. She said, "Kenneth is not here," and she seemed really cold when she answered the officers. Now, Sean politely reminded her that he was required to do a welfare check on Kenny, and suddenly Sheila changed her story. Calmly, she returned with Kenny himself, nudging him at the door. 24-year-old Kenny appeared disorientated, but largely unharmed at first glance, wearing only a pair of jeans and an uneasy smile. Sean felt relieved, and Kenny stammered that he'd just been taking a warm bath. And after a brief talk, the officers left, believing there was no immediate danger. But this was virtually the last normal moment in this case.
I don't know. It just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it doesn't sit well with you,
It almost
right?
seems like it's like the last moments, like she's getting prepared to like get rid of him because like normally he was seen by people around the community, neighbors, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, just to have him disappear like that and then obviously have her lie about him being there or what have you, it just seems
Fishy.
Seems grim. Seems grim, Becky.
Seems grim, yeah. And also I feel like if I was a police officer, that would be a really weird moment because you're like, why is she lying? But he's here. And then he comes to the door seeming all kind of like run down and stuff. But at the end of the day, he's saying he's okay, right? So it's like you get this weird vibe about it, but it's like, what can you do? Their hands must have been somewhat tied.
Yeah. No, you're totally right.
So
but from like
just weird.
Obviously from where we're sitting, we have the ability to speculate a little bit further into circumstances like this solely because we kind of know the outcome, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas what you're saying is right. Like if you didn't know the outcome and you just saw the situation for what it was, like your hands would be tied. You'd be forced to just accept the reality of the situation, which Kenny's saying he's fine. So
yeah. Don't you wish you could just like have cops see those scenarios and be like, I just know in my intuition something is fucked up here and I'm going to do something about it. But the damn law gets in their way.
Yeah, I know.
Obviously, that would leave a lot of gray area to infringe on people's rights. I understand that. But like knowing, like true crime, we're in a true crime podcast. We know the outcome ultimately. And yeah, it's just like you want to like, just do something. But they can't.
Yeah, it's because it's like these moments are like those pivotal moments that change the course of the victim's future.
Yes.
And if they had known it at the time, like Kenny, might still be here.
Yeah. Now, over the next few days, new evidence of foul play began to surface elsewhere on the farm. On April 1st, 2006, Corporal Todd McMaster and his partner received an alarming call. Kenny County was very sick. Witnesses had seen Sheila carrying a limp, naked Kenny into the barn, tying him to the floor. McMaster and another officer rushed out again to the farm. By now, panic was setting in with Kenny's family and neighbors. And as the officers approached, they heard the faint hum of machinery from a nearby workshop. In the barn, they found Sheila calmly tuning a car motor. In the next room, a horrifying sight. A huge 55-gallon metal drum. Fire still smoldering beneath. Officers poked around at the ashes and the ash-covered debris inside. Now, embedded in the blackened coals was a human femur, the hip end still containing charred flesh. Nearby lay a scorched pair of sneakers. Sean abruptly realized what he was seeing. They had found the remains of Kenny County. Blood stained the barn floor. A bloody mattress was partially incinerated outside. The farm, which had looked so pastoral from the road, had just revealed a very gruesome secret.
Yikes, Becky.
Ugh. Man, those goddamn burn barrels, man.
Ugh, they just get us every time. It's so gnarly. But can we talk about the mattress?
Yes, we can talk about it.
A bloody mattress? It makes me really sad. Right? Obviously, this was Kenny's own personal hell. A mattress where he was probably tied up, probably kept, maybe locked in a cage or something. Maybe that was his cage. I don't know. But obviously, if we pair that with what the officer saw in the Walmart, a bruised up face and what have you, like, this poor man was getting beaten to shit, man.
Yeah.
And she just tried to burn the evidence.
Right? Yeah, it tells a pretty sad story. Like, without fully knowing, like, the specific details, it obviously paints, like, a pretty terrible couple days, weeks.
Yeah, and actually it just gets worse with what they find next.
Yeah. Now, detectives converged on the scene. A search warrant was swiftly obtained, and then investigators scoured every corner of the property. In the fields and woods, in the chicken coop, even in the septic tank. They found evidence of more horrors. Dozens of small bone fragments, dried blood spatters on the wall, and kitchen implements smeared with blood. They uncovered more charred bone fragments in other burn sites on the land. In the farmhouse itself, a trunk contained a hidden video recorder. On it were the audio tapes of Kenny's last days. Now, in these tapes, Sheila's voice echoed against Kenny's muffled screams. She commanded him to confess to being a pedophile, over and over, cutting off his denials. "Ask me again," she can be heard saying on one tape. Then Kenny's moans, I never hurt anyone. I'm not a pedophile." These recordings would become crucial evidence of her torture. So she thought he was a pedophile?
Yeah. Oh. And this incident is kind of where I feel like maybe her past trauma has come into play a little bit, because obviously her father was a pedophile and his friends were as well. Like, they assaulted her, right? So that's where I'm like, okay, maybe her psyche is a little messed up because she's putting her past trauma onto Kenny.
For sure. Now, I'd be curious at this moment, and like, we'd probably never know. Did she literally just fabricate this all? Or was there something that made her think that? Like, I don't think Kenny was. But, like, did it just come out of thin air in her own brain?
Well, this is the basically underpinning of the criminal investigation, right? Exactly. And the trial.
Yep. Now, meanwhile, police continue to investigate Sheila's other tenants. Michael DeLodge's cell phone was off, and people reported not seeing him in years.
And this was the first tenant she had after her husband's death. Or her partner's death.
Yeah. In the barnyard, detectives found another grim clue. Human toes, scattered among the ashes and soil. Forensic analysis later confirmed the toes did not belong to Kenny. They still have never been identified. But they belong to a young adult male. The discovery hinted that Kenny and Michael might not have been her only victims. And rumors swirled that perhaps Bill LaBarre's death itself was no accident. But Sheila denied any role. But the investigators noted strange inconsistencies in his demise. And on April 2nd, 2006, with the burn barrel and the bones all around them, police had more than enough to make an arrest.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, one thing I did read, Bev, is that when they first were on Sheila's property and they saw this femur, because they didn't have a search warrant, they could only, see it. They couldn't collect it, nothing like that. And so by the time they had gotten a search warrant, a lot of those remains that they had seen with their own eyes were actually burned. So it made it, a little more complicated. But obviously they still had more than enough.
Okay, so that's crazy. So how did they have more than enough if most of them were burned?
Because it doesn't, it didn't burn all of it. Like, they're still, like, burning a human body. There's still remains left usually, right? Like little fragments and stuff like that. But the actual, like, femur they saw was not, like...
a femur no more. It was burnt to shit, but there were fragments. Okay, well, that makes sense. So there's still evidence of human remains on her property, but not the femur.
Yeah, like the stuff they had seen was more charred and damaged and not visible anymore. So that sucked with their timing of having to get the search warrant, you know?
Yeah, that does suck. Damn the law.
Damn the law. See what I was saying? Like, if you see something wrong, they should just be able to charge in.
I know.
Take action. Take the evidence.
A human femur, like, that should constitute an immediate search warrant. Like, hey, there's like human remains on this. Like, yeah, it should just be like a freaking quick phone call that gets like approved right away. Now, I do understand that some police officers could really misuse that.
Oh, for sure.
To their advantage and like probably not use it appropriately. So I get why they don't in a sense. But I'm also like, in this situation, like, what if she was able to completely get rid of all physical evidence completely? Like, what if, you know, and all they had to go off of was these police officers, like, accounts of what they saw.
Right? I don't know. I mean, good thing there was lots of other evidence to support what they saw virtually, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, but, like, what if she had done just such a fabulous job of getting rid of the remains?
Doubtful. I mean, there was charred fragments everywhere. It's like,
sprinkled.
How are you going to pick everything up, right? Like, that's crazy. So maybe we're getting a little out of hand here, but I still think I agree with you. It would be nice if like the process might have been a little bit quicker so that she didn't have the chance to like burn more.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that. But again, the law is there to protect both sides. So I guess I get it. Now, Sheila LaBarre's arrest was as sudden as it was inevitable. On that late April day, police closed in on her New Hampshire farm. At first, she insisted she was innocent, telling officers she was being framed, and demanded they get bail money for her. When questioned, Sheila made odd claims Kenny and Mike were pedophiles who deserved to die as perverts harming children. Yet as more evidence emerged, her story fell apart. Confronted with the remains and the tapes, she eventually admitted to the deaths, offering bizarre justifications about her being an avenging angel sent by God. By the end of the day, detectives had marched Sheila LaBarre off to jail. She was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, and the community was stunned. The glamorous widow next door was now a confessed killer. And over the following days, sheriff's investigators continued combing the property. They removed the burned-out vehicles, searched the septic systems, and cataloged every bone fragment they could find. Sheila cooperated during a 30-minute interrogation. She calmly told them exactly how she killed her 2 victims, stabbing Kenny County repeatedly and then burning his body. When asked about Michael, she claimed the youngest of her pet victims also killed by burning. Pressed for details, she said only God told me to do it, offering no clear motive beyond vague delusional ramblings.
And I think this is where, again, it gets confused with her mental state during the killings, right?
Yeah.
Because she claimed to be an avenging angel, like hearing words from God to lay down the law on these terrible men, right?
Yeah, and justifying those actions that way.
Yeah, so was she truly in a delusional state where she was hearing a voice from God tell her to do things? Or is that just her, like you said, justifying her own wrongdoings to kind of take the easy way out and kind of avoid taking accountability?
That is the question through basically the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, during the trial.
Now, in subsequent weeks, authorities also exhumed Bill LaBarre's body for re-examination. Although a natural death on record, the suspicions lingered. Nothing conclusive was found to tie Sheila to Bill's death, though questions still remained. Meanwhile, the shocked families of Kenny and Michael grieved their sons. Carolyn, Kenny's mother, was furious at law enforcement for not acting sooner. She later hand-delivered a petition to the Attorney General's office signed by hundreds, accusing the Epping police of gross negligence for ignoring her pleas. She was quoted, "The police could have taken my son and rescued him from Sheila," she demanded. His murder didn't have to be. So Sheila LaBarre's trial began in May of 2008 in a packed courtroom in Brentwood, New Hampshire. The charge was first-degree murder for County and Deluge. Sheila entered pleas of not guilty by reason of insanity. Her defense immediately framed her as mentally ill. They portrayed her as a deeply sick individual, incapable of forming criminal intent. Brad Bailey, a seasoned defense attorney, told reporters he would show that Sheila suffered from severe mental disease. He noted flatly that there seems to be no basis whatsoever in reality for her claims that her victims were predators. Rather, he planned to demonstrate that childhood traumas and psychosis had driven her actions, which we already kind of talked about ourselves, right?
Yes, this is where the case really starts to address the issue.
Yeah. Now, the prosecution's strategy was clear. Lay out the gruesome facts to the jury and argue that Sheila understood right from wrong when she killed. Now, in New Hampshire, unlike some states, once insanity is raised, the defense has the obligation to prove it. The defense called several psychiatrists, Dr. Malcolm Rogers and Dr. Roger Gray, among others, who testified that Sheila suffered from chronic mental illness. Gray painted a vivid picture on the witness stand. He described looking into Sheila's eyes and seeing someone plagued by delusions. He explained that her childhood, real world was populated with people who could use her however they wanted and wouldn't protect her, while even adults had threatened her with death. On the stand, Sheila herself broke down into tears when Gray recounted these horrors of her past. Gray argued that these experiences warped Sheila's adult mind. He said she developed paranoid delusions, and she genuinely believed the men in her life were abusing children or drugs, even when there was no evidence. There's no place in her world where she feels safe, Dr. Gray testified. He pointed out that Sheila would accuse boyfriends of unimaginable crimes, hurting animals, cheating, abusing kids, claims that witnesses said had no basis in reality. According to Gray, this was the trail from trauma to psychosis. He diagnosed her with schizoaffective disorder, a mix of schizophrenia and mood disorder, and a delusional disorder. On cross-examination, prosecutors hammered Gray on why Sheila had been so articulate to others if she was truly delusional. But Gray stood by his opinion. Her intelligence and charm were a facade, masking chaos underneath.
Well, that I agree with.
Right? But do you think that more people would have maybe noticed how delusional she was throughout her life, though, besides just these men?
Well, to be fair, we didn't really get to hear from people in her life. So it is hard to say. I guess the only examples we have are the men, and it does seem to show a pattern of delusioned thinking. But is that enough to make the claim that she did not know right from wrong, that she was so delusional and her reality was so warped to the extent she didn't really know what she was doing when she committed these crimes? I don't think so, because truthfully, every criminal that we've really covered, and murderer, I should say, that we have covered, a lot of them do have childhood trauma, but does that mean that they don't know right from wrong?
Not necessarily.
Usually no, right? Yeah.
So to say that you would be so insane to not know right from wrong, that's what they're ultimately trying to prove then, right?
Yeah, that's what they're trying to prove, but I just don't think saying you had trauma, I agree with what he's saying. I do definitely feel like there's no world in which she feels safe. I do think her past experiences have molded her actions, but in terms of pleading insanity, I don't think that's enough. Yeah. Because it's not like it was a pattern of her abuse towards these people, right? She sought them out. It's not like they came upon her, something triggered something in her mind. She thought they were abusing a child. It's not like she saw something happening on the street and just reacted in a insane psychosis state. It's she sought these men out. She lured them to her home and abuse them over long periods of time, right? Like,
Yeah.
if it was an insanity plea, I just don't think that this constitutes as that, to be honest.
For sure. And if she thought like multiple men were pedophiles, let's say, because she
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that several times, why not go to the police for any of them?
Exactly.
Why not contact the authorities to like, why take it into your own hands?
Exactly. And the other thing is, like, when she's confronted by the police initially, she says, oh, they're pedophiles, this, that, and the other thing. But when they press her further, that's kind of when she makes a statement that she's like getting intel from God or whatever to be this angel of action, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's more a manipulation tactic for her than it is based in any reality. Because why not would you be like talking about that bullshit right from the start?
Yeah, like when they asked you, you
Mm-hmm.
could deny it, but then when you admit, why not just say that right out the gate, like you said?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Now, Brad Bailey also had Sheila testify, where she claimed again that voices from God had told her to kill perverts. She insisted her victims were child molesters, though no evidence ever supported this. The jury also heard from 2 women who had dated Sheila. One claimed Sheila pulled a gun on her ex. Another said she was lucky to be alive because Sheila had threatened her partner. Even Sheila's ex-husband, Wayne Ennis, had come forward earlier saying Sheila once asked him to kill Wilfred LaBarre. Evidence, the defense said, that of her violent paranoia.
Wow, to kill her husband, or the one that she was with for 13 years that left his estate to her.
Yes. So you know how they were kind of like wondering, had she killed him? I think, obviously they don't know, but that does make you think about it even more.
Absolutely, it does.
Now, the prosecution countered with a straightforward narrative. The physical evidence showed premeditated murder and a calculated cover-up. Investigators testified about the charred bones, the incinerated mattresses, the recordings of forced confessions. A crime scene expert noted how Sheila had tried to disguise the crime, burning Kenny's body piece by piece, moving bone fragments, flushing the septic tank. They emphasized that police were onto her. A bloodied footprint in the snow and the audio tapes had led them there, and she fled across state lines before capture as well. What had happened is that Sheila caught wind that there was a warrant out for her arrest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she decided to flee, and she had a bunch of cash on her, and it took them like 2 or 3 days to find her and arrest her, and she had made attempts to disguise herself, but it was a pretty like minor manhunt. So that's what had happened. But obviously it showed, I feel like when people flee, it looks like they're guilty.
Oh, 100%.
And so when you look at that, of her trying to flee, her premeditation, all that stuff, like she knows she did something wrong. Kind of regardless of her delusions of what she thought those men did, she knew that killing them was not right.
Exactly.
And she knew the consequences of getting caught.
Right.
So I think, like I said, regardless of the delusion, she knew right from wrong. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Importantly, the prosecution highlighted Sheila's actions after the murders. Witnesses testified that she continued dating and charmed another man even after the bodies were found, arguing that a truly insane person wouldn't have been so coherent. One detective pointed out that when the burn barrel with the bone was discovered, Sheila contacted the police and lured them back to her farm by playing the audio of Kenny confessing to being a pedophile, almost as if she was like wanting them to find something on him, I guess. But by contrast, real mental illness would likely provoke confusion, not a staged confession tape.
Yeah, she's trying to take away her wrongdoing by pinning it on somebody else. Say, look at what they did. They deserve this, or whatever she's trying to do with that. But
Yeah,
she's obviously trying to justify her actions, which signals to me that she knows that by the state, by the law, she did wrong. Because, as you said, in someone who's suffering from mental illness and truly insane would not have the wherewithal or to do that, to plan something like that out, or to even know to do that, right?
Exactly. Now, as the trial neared its end, the jury was allowed to visit the crime scene and view the evidence themselves. Sheila, notable in the courtroom for her stoic, clasped hands posture and a stunned belt under her dress, sat expressionless as they toured her farm and a nearby Walmart. At one point, defense psychiatrist Gray asked the jury to imagine a little girl alone in the night shivering at home while an attacker came. He said that was how Sheila's childhood felt, a world where she can present herself as being put together, and yet underneath is all this chaos. These words hung in the air as the jury deliberated. After deliberating, the jury handed down its decision on June 20th, 2008. They flatly rejected Sheila's insanity defense. The 2 women and 7 men found that Sheila LaBarre was sane when she committed these killings, and they convicted her of first-degree murder for both Kenneth County and Michael DeLodge. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without parole. In court, defense attorney Bailey admitted the outcome, but held his ground. He believed Sheila truly was mentally ill, so that she could not conform her behavior to the law or appreciate the difference between right and wrong, though the jury simply just did not accept it. He pointed out the unique strain of New Hampshire law. The burden was on him to prove her insanity, whereas in most states the prosecution would have had to prove sanity. Bailey mused afterward that perhaps the jurors, even if they believed she was disturbed, decided Sheila was too dangerous, that she might one day get out if she was placed in a mental health facility. So, like, kind of almost regardless, she's just too dangerous for the public and men.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we said about, like, the pattern of her being a murderous woman and, like, just abusive woman. Like, it wasn't 1, 2, 3 people. Like, there's numerous people in her life that she treated this way.
Exactly.
And not only that, Becky, but it's like she sought these people out. It shows, like, such an intent to harm. You know what I mean? Like, she wanted to do this. She sought people out and she followed through. So, like, I have no doubt that if she was out, she would do this again and again and again.
Yeah, her victim count would just keep increasing for sure. So, in the years since the trial, Sheila LaBarre has been housed in prison. By all accounts, she remains unrepentant and firmly entrenched in her delusion that her crimes were justified. She reportedly takes no part in rehabilitation programs and has had disciplinary issues. So she's just a menace. She's a menace to society. She's a menace to the prison system. She is where she needs to be, Bev.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Now,
I'm like, sorry, but, like, even if somebody is a pedophile, I can't justify killing them. Like, because I just firmly believe 2 wrongs don't make a right. Mm-hmm. And I think the proper course of action is to, like, let the law manage the situation, and, like, they will suffer through their own actions. But this vigilante shit that she's talking about, like, her crimes will never be justified. Not only that, because there was no proof of pedophilia from these men, but she can't, I hate that she tries to justify her crimes by simply stating that they were pedophiles, because I truly don't think that even justifies what she did to them.
Hands down. And you know what also is really bad is that, you know, in almost every trial you see online that gets, like, really big, there's always people who believe and don't believe, right? So there's probably a set of people who firmly believe that she was justified and that these men were pedophiles, which is sad because they are just victims. I mean, shame on them if they were, but there's no proof of it, right? So you're just making these victims look bad when they shouldn't. It's not fair to them, and they died on top of it. You know, like, shame on her. Shame.
I just think it's like in all of these cases, I often think back to the trauma that a lot of the criminals have faced, and I think I'm always struck with the sympathy for that, because I know that trauma can really negatively impact someone's life and their psyche. But my husband, we were not talking about crimes like this, I don't believe, but he did say something that one of his coaches had said to him a while ago, and that was, no one deserves bad things to happen to them, but some people earn it. And I think in these cases where it's like those people that murder, they don't deserve to have had that trauma happen to them, but they earn their consequences by how they deal with it and what they do later in life, right? Because I have sympathy for what happens to them in their early life, but I don't have sympathy for the outcome, because everyone has that choice to do good or to do wrong. And if you choose to do wrong because of your past, you have earned the consequences, plain and simple.
Yeah, that is like a great way to say it, because, yeah, it sucks what you went through, but there's right and wrong at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And having trauma doesn't justify you doing bad things. So after the trial, obviously the two families still have to deal with their grief, right?
Yes.
And Carolyn Lodge still dreams of getting total justice for Kenny. She firmly believes Sheila should be held fully accountable, despite the defense's claim of insanity. The police officers who saw Kenny at Walmart had been cleared of wrongdoing by the state, but Carolyn never forgave them. She said maybe they were afraid of Sheila. Most likely, I think everybody was afraid of Sheila, but that doesn't mean stop doing your jobs. And we talked about that, right? Like, how could you just let him go? Clearly something was wrong. You know, maybe if you had interjected, the outcome wouldn't have been the same.
Right. I can see how she holds some type of resentment towards them, because it really did change the outcome for her son.
For sure.
To a large extent. I'm not blaming them. I don't necessarily think they did anything wrong, but I can see how a mother who lost her son would have a hard time forgiving them.
For sure. Now, the question that everyone is really left with was Sheila LaBarre a serial killer? Had she killed more people? Did she have more victims?
Well, the toes that didn't belong to Kenny or Mike makes me think, yeah.
You know what I hope those police do in this case? I hope that they go and get a DNA profile of those toes, and I think they should do some genealogy work if they haven't already. That's what I think there, Bev.
I think she should be held accountable for everyone that she could have killed, right? Because there might be someone out there thinking their family member just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing that that family member is the victim of a horrific crime, right? So,
yep.
I agree, Becky. They should look into that. They should.
I'm going to send a nice official email. Hello, have you thought of genealogy? I am just a podcaster and, a massage therapist, but have you thought of that? They'd be like, F-O.
Yeah,
exactly. This bitch, who does she think she is? Anyways, obviously, as we spoke about earlier, there is speculation that Sheila killed her ex-husband, well, late husband, Bill, and there's still gossip around that topic.
What's interesting about that is the FBI defines a serial killer as someone with 3 or more killings. And right now she's only convicted of 2, so technically not a serial killer, but most likely, with what you just said, with Bill LaBarre, who people think she did kill, and potential other victims.
She could
with
be.
Their chopped up toes and the burn barrels and stuff. There could be more than 2, more than 3. So, do I think she's a serial killer, Becky? I do.
I'm not sure, but, I would lean towards yes. And it wouldn't surprise me if she had other victims. That's for sure. Now, one veteran crime reporter, Kevin Flynn, who covered the case and later corresponded with Sheila, painted the picture Sheila as a lonely, damaged woman who believed herself ordained to murder evildoers. Sheila's own words on tape, heard in court, had her calmly proclaiming herself the avenging angel of the Lord on a mission. But prosecutors and public alike felt there was no basis whatsoever in reality to her claims that Kenny or Mike were ever guilty of any abuse. The man who defended her, Brad Bailey, admitted he never saw real evidence that mental illness caused the murders. He only saw the shattered woman after them. Sheila LaBarre's case raised uncomfortable questions about evil, mental illness, and justice. Could a person so clearly traumatized become capable of such cold-blooded murder? Psychiatrists in her case insisted her psychosis was genuine, yet a jury of lay people saw only a scheme for murder. Their verdict suggests that, for better or worse, Sheila was held criminally responsible in the eyes of the law. which she was. She's in prison for life. In the end, whether Sheila LaBarre is remembered as a monster or as a mentally ill, tragic figure, her victims truly deserve to be remembered simply as victims. Kenny County and Michael DeLodge were young men who hoped for a chance at happiness on that farm. Instead, they met a horrific fate, and their families continued to seek closure.
Which I get, because I just don't think there's any closure, really, when you lose someone you loved like that.
No, especially so tragically, so my heart really goes out to them.
As does mine, Rebecca.
Well, Bev, this was the sad and tragic case of Kenny County and Michael DeLodge, and that's all I have for you today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing. And just your weekly reminder to download our weekly episodes, follow us on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, and give us a follow on our social medias. You can find us at Luminol on the Wall. Can't wait till next week.